Hello and welcome to episode 1 of MMM Sister Stories podcast. Today, Sister Eilis Weber talks about her interesting life as an MMM sister. Thank you for listening, and we hope you enjoy our first episode.
My name is Eilis Weber. I entered MMM in 1967. I forgot to say I'm from Dublin. I came in as a qualified nurse. And after my initial formation and first profession, I went straight to do my midwifery training, which in those days was 1 year. And almost immediately after qualifying 1 year later, I was on my way to Angola, which at the time was a Portuguese colony. Now, our Mother General at the time, Mother Stella, rang me in the middle of my district midwifery and asked me, would you like to go to Angola? I said, I'd love to go to Angola, but I had no idea where it was. So I had to look it up afterwards. So in order to go to Angola, you had to learn the language. And I went to Lisbon to learn the language and stayed with Irish Dominican sisters. And it was like from home to home. Now, there was trouble. Portugal was still in control of all its colonies. She called them provinces. And there was trouble in Mozambique. So I got stuck in Lisbon. Stuck in the sense I couldn't get my visa. And I was there for the best part of a year. Learning Portuguese and etc., but wanting to be in Angola. So eventually, at the end of 1971, I arrived in Angola. And I worked in Angola for approximately 20 years. Angola followed the policy of MMM, where we set up places in remote areas. So we were in the middle of Godspeed, there were goats and things, and the odd cow, but So one of my first experiences of Angola was where I was initially, there was no electricity. Now I come from Dublin. I had never lived anywhere with no electricity, and I was convinced the snakes would get me. So every night I'd go with my torch and I'd look under the bed and I'd look under the pillow looking for snakes, and it was with the light of a torch. But after a while you adapt. I was never bitten by a snake. So I was in Angola during colonial times for just 2 years. And we had a big place and a little place. I was in the little place. In our big place, it was a large hospital, a nursing school, and the directora of the school, Ethna Walsh, wanted to leave it. The Portuguese are very bureaucratic, etc. I was chosen to replace Ethna Walsh. So in order to, when I was in the small place, Kumato, and so I had to leave, come to Ireland, check in UCD, and I did a 2-year diploma course and successfully completed it. And then I went back to Angola to the big place, which was a large hospital and a thriving nursing school. And I took up residence there, and I was the tutor, the director of the School of Nursing, yeah. In the nursing school, it was deeply satisfying. I mean, Angola was a very underdeveloped country. The kids didn't have much opportunity. We were in the middle of the bush, but we had some students from the city, and the majority were from the bush. And even their knowledge of Portuguese was not good. We used to encourage some people with good Portuguese to come in a few times a week to teach the students. But it was deeply satisfying because, number one, the students wanted to learn. Number two, they were fearless. I still think of when I saw a student nurse doing a lumbar puncture. Now, in Ireland, certainly in my day, You wouldn't have a student nurse doing a lumbar puncture. But these students were fearless. And I don't mean they were careless, they were fearless. And they would do it better than any doctor. So the nursing school was deeply satisfying. And it was great to see them, coming up. And then we went back to Angola for some celebration. I can't remember. I think it was 50 years of MMM. And didn't I meet some of my little students? And some of them were in positions of authority, and that felt great. Yeah. In Angola, we had a war, and we were very much involved in the war, and we made a certain amount of publicity because of the war. And it was not the Civil War. When independence came to Angola, there was a civil war like every country, but that didn't bother us that much. We did have wounded, but it didn't bother us that much. But what really impacted on our lives was the South Africans invaded Angola in their search for SWAPO. Now, SWAPO was the IRA of Namibia, our neighbouring country. And because we had a communist government, and so did Namibia, or the SWAPO were a communist, they had asylum in Angola. So the South Africans came in. And where we were in the middle of nowhere 50 years ago, suddenly we were on the main route of the South Africans coming in to invade Angola. And this was totally unscheduled. We didn't know anything about it. But we ended up in a unique situation. And there were bombings, there were deaths, there were this, that, and the other. And some days they would come in huge convoys, bumpity, bumpity, bump. And other times they came a few. Sometimes they were young soldiers. And a number of them reminded me of some of my nephews. Nice kids, Other times when things were very serious, it was the older soldier, a lot of whom had, what would you describe, a paunch, tummy, But we ended up being the only movable body of people who could go in and out of the war zone. And that went on for months. And there used to be food supplies brought into this area in the old days, but nobody was allowed into the war zone. So we ended up, basically we were there for health purposes, but we ended up organising convoys of trucks to bring food into the people. And we had to be, one car of ours, all our cars had red crosses on them. And in order to accompany this convoy, we had to have 2 white flags on each window. And we had to use branches, we'd nothing else. And you'd stick out your flag. So we were at the head of the convoy. I used to say to the others, it's like the Duffy Circus or something. So once we came to the war zone, our zone, you'd stick out the flags and they'd all follow us. And at the beginning, we had another car at the back, which was a huge demand. And you had to order the food, you had to do everything. And this wasn't part of our schedule, but this was the need, kind of. So we had loads of things like that. And then I'm talking about coming from the city. 30 kilometres down the other direction, there's a river. And there used to be a bridge. And there was a hospital, but all that went. And so we used to do clinics down there. And in order to get across the river and into the little village, you had to climb over a bridge, kind of. Now, you didn't climb over it, you kind of manoeuvred, and it was hot because it was very warm. And you'd be putting your knee up, ouch, kind of thing, and so on. So it was kind of challenging. And our Mother General, Jude, Sister Jude, who'd only died a month ago, she was as agile as a mountain goat, you know. So we did that, and we'd bring people, give them lifts, do everything. And one time the convoy, we did the convoy about once a month, and one of the fellas was drunk. We were very lucky that there weren't more drunk, the drivers, I mean, and one fella ended up under the lorry, but anyway, it was okay afterwards, you know. So we were doing those kind of things, and we ourselves were on the road the first time they bombed us, the South Africans, it wasn't deliberate, we were a car moving, so I was the driver. I was bringing this man, an electrician who had done a few jobs for us, and I was bringing him down on a Sunday morning back to his base. And we were driving along, and I heard boom. And I thought it was a blowout. I had never had a blowout. So, I went to slow down, and the man says to me, "Irma, vam." And I said, "Care these air vam." He repeated. He knew, but I didn't know. He knew we had been bombed. So I said to him, "Care these air vam." And he said, "Vamos, let us go," you know. So I put the foot down and zoom. And it was only when we got into the village, Shangangu, that I realised we had been bombed. And we could have been both dead. And there the two of us were to the good, you know. So, and that was the first time. So after that, the South Africans said, well, they were awfully sorry, you know. But we had to communicate with them, tell them when we were travelling. So we decided we'd go to the city, Lubango, on Wednesday. We had to write out a note in English, well, I mean, we speak English, to the South Africans saying 2 cars are leaving the mission at 5 a.m. and one is a Peugeot and the other is a Land Rover. And I think we had to give the reg number. And we are leaving at 5 a.m. and we hope to return the following day at 6 p.m. And this was meant to keep us safe. One time in Shangangu, that's the little village, we always brought you spent a lot of time, as you'd know, I'm sure, from Brazil, it's just sitting, waiting. A lot of life in the tropics is waiting. And we always had a magazine or something to read, and there was a Doctrine on Life in the car. And you never locked a car out there, you know, it was different. Anyway, one of the South Africans had written on it, "Do not travel after dark. If you do, without authorization, we shoot first and question afterwards." Now, we should have kept that, but anyway, we were too busy doing other things. So, like that, to me, that made a huge impact because we were bringing people and patients and food and anything you could imagine, you know. So, and then I was gone on home leave, and before I came back, the South Africans came in on a Sunday morning, and they apparently spoke to the sisters and said the war is now going to get worse. And whoever he was, he said he had come to propose to us that we leave in the interests of our own safety, and they would guarantee us safe delivery to either Namibia or South Africa. So what would the sisters say or do? Anyway, they told him we couldn't give an answer stat. So they arranged they'd come back in the afternoon or the evening. So the sisters talked about it, they prayed about it, they did everything. So the answer was no way, we're going nowhere. We were a community of about 8 or 9. 8 were white, and Cecilia Zuzu was the only black sister. And apartheid was very visible in some South Africans, but not in all, you know. So we said no. Thank you very much for your offer, but we're going nowhere. And they said, well, then, you know, well, I don't know what he said. I wasn't there. I had gone on home leave. So We had no choice. The hospital was packed, a big hospital. The nursing school stopped every time we had bombings because they had to go to the hospital to help with the victims. But so we are remembered there. We were the people who didn't leave. But if we had left, we'd be heading for suicide. How could you leave? And they were attacked us a few times. And this all continued until at one point there were negotiations with Namibia and South Africa, and the thing cleared up. But I can't remember how long we were involved. I can't remember. I think in missionaries in general, like the difficulty with visas is getting more and more chronic. You know, look at, what's her name, who was meant to come to the new community, and she's been waiting about 2 years. And you hear the reports of visas all over the place. And the other thing is the danger, the physical danger. But I presume it was always physically dangerous. So, and the fact that MMM, our European side and our American side seem to be dwindling. Our African side, I would suggest, is healthy. The last publication you gave, you mentioned encouraging numbers in Africa. I'm not sure where, but so I think they are the changes, and like the church is changing, everything is changing. I mean, well, in Ireland we are very blessed. Well, we were until the 23rd of October or November. There are lots of things that are very good. In Ireland, we have relative peace. The riots would suggest a new way of living, and the influence of social media. I'm sure there are good sides to it, but there are also evil sides. And I think those riots wouldn't have been as intense if there was no such thing as social media. But and our knowledge is increasing and multiplying. But like on the other, well, you've asked me the good things, not the bad things. So, and like the fact that people are afraid to have children now because of everything, I don't know. But I think there's lots of good things, and there's food, and there's air, and there's everything. The structure of religious life today is very different to when you and I entered. And that could be said to be good, rather. I think, I mean, many things are good about modern thing, but you'd wonder what the future, in a 20 years' time, what the situation is, you know. But like God is overall, so, and I think the fact that we started a new community up here, and everything seemed to go wrong. And yet there are new initiatives. We now have a youth group in the parish and other things. You know, I think that's good. So it's just like the old days, Mother Mary and her gangrenous toes when the radiator fell on her. But it was just part of the plan. For what reason, I don't know.
Thank you for listening to Sister Stories Episode 1. Stay tuned for Episode 2.